Dueling genre.
In the world of Hollywood, movies get greenlit and redlit. They get remade and rebooted. But we are the Ideal. I'm Sam Gasch, and you are listening to Ideal Remake. Thank you for listening to Ideal Remake. We take movies that either have been, will be, or should be remade and talk about what the ideal version of that remake would be. Now, when you kill a king, you don't stab them in the dark. You kill them where the whole court can watch them die. And when you remake a movie as celebrated as this one, you do it on a podcast so that everyone can hear. So Dana, is Gangs of New York a movie that has been, will be, or should be remade?
Gangs of New York is a movie that has not yet been remade. And I don't believe that it should be remade because I honestly think it's a damn near perfect movie. But
Fair.
Because Hollywood loves to recycle things, and especially things that are as wonderful as Gangs of New York, it probably will be remade in the future.
I think that's about as accurate as it is possible to be. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So, first things first. Dana, hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
For anyone who happens to be listening, introduce yourself to the microphone.
Hi, I'm Dana Braziel-Solovy. I am a comedy writer in Los Angeles who also works in the art department as an art director, which is why one of the many reasons I love the beautiful cinematic movie Gangs of New York.
And for anyone who's been paying attention to any of the strikes that have been happening in LA over the last year and change, if you've seen any pins on anybody in any pictures, they've been made by Dana.
Yeah, I like buttons.
Buttons. Pins, buttons.
Same word, different great ornamentation.
Yes, excellent. So, Dana, do you remember the first time you ever saw Gangs of New York?
Yes, because it was actually relatively recently.
Really?
I became a hard and fast fan.
Okay. So what made this happen?
Okay, so I was doing research. This is not advice, but doing research for a pilot I was writing that involved the Salem witch trials. I just wanted like a quick idea, so I decided to watch The Crucible.
Okay.
Starring Daniel Day-Lewis, which I will from now forward call D-Day.
Fair.
D-Day was in The Crucible, and I just thought he was so amazing. And I talked to one of my friends about him. I am sad to say I didn't know much about D-Day.
That's fair.
But
you can comfortably say that D-Day often disappears.
He disappeared.
And so you don't, I didn't realize it, because I went into this movie not necessarily knowing anything about it, and I didn't know who was playing Bill the Butcher.
Okay.
Until the end credits.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, he's known for his method acting.
Right.
Right. So he, really goes hard and deep into a role.
Yes.
And so I really liked him in The Crucible, and I had a conversation with one of my friends who was like, yeah, he's won a bunch of Oscars and been nominated for a bunch of Oscars. So I started just kind of going down a D-Day hole and watched a bunch of his movies, and Gangs of New York is my favorite of those movies. So it was probably 3 months ago that I saw it.
Oh, wow.
Maybe
okay.
less.
Perfect. Okay, amazing. That's a fun way to get introduced to this, to just kind of go in sight unseen. I had always heard that this was an incredibly violent movie, but obviously very good.
Yeah.
I didn't find the movie to be particularly violent. It's obviously very good, but I didn't...
No.
The biggest violence for me is there's that big scene at the beginning where D-Day and Liam Neeson's whole gangs are having their big fight.
Yeah.
And there's a blink and you miss it moment where someone sticks 2 fingers in a dude's mouth and just pulls on the dude's cheek, and the cheek starts to rip. And I had a visceral reaction to that. And then everything else in the movie was pretty tame, all things concerned.
Yeah, it's definitely, it was made in 2002. So I guess taking that into perspective, how much was violence prominent at that time? Because now in 2024, I am a huge fan of The Boys. And
Sure.
The Boys season 4, I feel they kind of had this idea that they would just see how violent and obscurely violent they could get, what kind of ridiculous acts they could do of mutilation. And Bill the Butcher was a violent guy.
For sure.
And the violence, I think, in a way, and I think this is one thing that I change about the movie, and I have a question, actually. I have a question for you.
Please.
Okay, here's my question, is that because I sometimes have this problem with Martin Scorsese, is that I don't like certain characters or certain things that happen. And I have gotten the response from certain people that Martin Scorsese is telling a historically accurate story.
Sure.
So my question is, how historically accurate do we want to be?
So when we do our version, I think it's important that we stay somewhat historically accurate, but I also think it's important that we decide what the lesson and story is for us to tell.
Right.
For the movie as it exists, it's, boy, these sure are real men and real Americans. And I'm like, okay, I don't give a shit about that. And I also don't particularly care about, like, the lack of women involved, despite how historically accurate that actually was. For me, when we get into it, I think the real things to talk about are, we have these two people starting a war against each other, but at the end of the day, it's two people leading the poor people in this big conflict as a larger distraction while Tammany Hall runs everything in the background, the actual true villain that's sort of manipulating and pushing these two people to continue fighting. And it's hinted at a little bit in the movie.
Right.
But it feels a much more throwaway in a version that I would do, where it's just like, yeah, it's these gangs fighting for everything, but they're basically fighting for scraps.
But that's interesting, because one particular line hit me when I was rewatching it last night, which was, it is rich folks that Tammany is playing. He's with them the night of the big attack.
Yeah.
Right? And it's quoted back to him that he once said that you could always pay half of the poor to kill the other half.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like that element of the movie.
For me, I would have put that line in Act 1, because I think that should be the thesis statement of the movie.
Okay, so that's super interesting. I actually think, upon my rewatch, I noticed something, which is that can we compare to Star Wars for a minute?
Absolutely we can.
Okay, so the original 3 Star Wars movies, episodes 4 through 6.
Yeah.
Right? Those were close interpersonal stories.
Yeah.
And then when George Lucas went back and made 1 through 3, those were like wider political stories. They were really about like the politics of the Star Wars universe.
Okay.
Right? So I kind of felt when I was watching Gangs of New York again, that the first half of the movie, before it is revealed that who Amsterdam really is.
Yeah.
That is a close interpersonal story between Amsterdam and Bill and all of these other characters. Once we have that big reveal, then it becomes a wider political story that involves Tammany Hall and the election and Boss Tweed, and we kind of go wider frame. So I actually feel like the first half of the movie is more interpersonal, talking about essentially the relationship between Priest Vallon and Bill the Butcher.
So you would take more time with Priest Vallon and Bill the Butcher before their big fight?
I don't know that I would take more time with them, but I think that what happens is that the movie transitions from being a revenge story to being a political story. I don't know if that needs to be changed, but I do think it's something worth noting, that it starts out being an interpersonal revenge story and it ends up being a political story. And I feel like those are fundamentally two different stories. And at the end of the movie, when we end, it is like both of those stories are kind of smushed together.
I tend to agree with you. I think that is interesting, and something that I thought was I couldn't decide how I felt about it. And the further away I get from it, the further obviously it seems really good, is that we have this big showdown between D-Day and Leonardo DiCaprio, LeDac. and we have this big fight that's going on between these two. But it's kind of not important in the grand scheme of, like, literally an elephant runs by and they go, what the hell is that? Well, forget that. We still have to go fight these guys. And it's like, it's this big fight it means a lot to them personally, but in the grand scheme of things, it's worthless and pointless because these other grander things are going on at the same time. This big revolution is happening at the same time. And I found that particularly interesting because it's like, oh, just the smallness of these characters. They're huge in their own worlds, but in the larger world, they're very small.
So that I actually, when I was thinking about just like loosely about how I would remake it.
Okay.
Now I think this is a hitch in my original thought.
It doesn't have to be.
Because I actually don't like that the face-off was the same night as the riots.
I agree. Continue.
I think that, first of all, like, is it, like, am I spoiling the end of the movie if I say...
I think that we are among the last two to ever see this movie.
Okay, so I can move forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Theoretically, what I'll do sometimes is we'll just do, like, a full walkthrough of the movie. We may not end up doing that just because it's Gangs of New York.
3 hours?
Liam Neeson and Bill the Butcher fight, and Bill the Butcher's team wins because they're the natives and they beat back the Irish. And then the Liam Neeson's kid gets taken away to an orphanage for 16 years, but now he's back, but it's a secret. And then he gets in real close with Bill the Butcher, and they develop this like father-son relationship. But then no, Leonardo DiCaprio decides no, he has to be a real man and kill the guy who killed his dad, or something. I don't know. And like there's Cameron Diaz is there, and then they have this big fight, and then oh no, Leonardo DiCaprio betrays Bill the Butcher, but then Bill the Butcher like says no, this will be the only guy I ever don't kill, and it's gonna be a mark on him, but then everyone's like yeah no, he's not dead, we can still follow him, and he's a big guy, and so basically he raises his own Irish army, and then they meet up in the streets, and Leonardo DiCaprio wins, but Bill the Butcher and everyone else is dead, so it was at what cost? But luckily he ends up with Cameron Diaz, and that seems pretty cool. The end.
Wow, I never imagined that movie would have been able to be distilled to like, that was like, what, a minute?
Yeah, that was about right.
Great job.
Yeah, and continue with what you were talking about.
Okay, so I didn't like that. I feel like in transforming into this big political story, which we ended up with at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
We lost, so basically... there was this parallel between the relationships, right? So Priest Vallon almost killed Bill the Butcher, but he didn't.
Correct.
And Bill the Butcher became a stronger person because Priest Vallon almost killed him, but didn't. And went back and killed Priest Vallon.
Yeah.
So correct. Then his son runs off, hides the knife, goes to an orphanage, and then comes back 16 years later to kill Bill the Butcher. He tries to kill Bill the Butcher, like Bill the Butcher had tried to kill Priest Vallon before, failed to kill the Butcher, like Bill the Butcher had failed to kill Priest Vallon before, and Bill the Butcher, like Priest Vallon had done for him before, says, I'm not going to kill you, I'm going to let you walk the world in shame. And like Bill the Butcher before, Amsterdam becomes a stronger fighter because of it, and comes back and kills Bill the Whoa, he doesn't kill Bill the Butcher.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't. A piece of shrapnel kills Bill the Butcher.
He delivers the final blow. Okay, but Bill the Butcher was dying.
Bill the Butcher was dying, and Bill the Butcher also... Okay, do you remember the scene where it's the first time that Amsterdam has done any great act, right? Amsterdam is starting to become... We'll just say Amsterdam is starting to become Bill the Butcher's apprentice.
Yes, he's becoming the true Mary Sue that he was always meant to be. Continue.
Exactly. So there is a pig hanging, and Bill the Butcher shows Amsterdam where to make the kill blows. He knows exactly where to make the kill blows, and he knows where to make the wounds. So in the fight, in the dust, Bill the Butcher runs by Amsterdam, and he doesn't make kill wounds. He only makes wounds.
Yeah.
He doesn't kill.
Glancing blows, teasing strikes in this big... There was a bunch of cannon fire, there's a bunch of dust and smoke in the air. Bill the Butcher's like running around Leonardo DiCaprio, slice here, slice there, but he's fine.
But largely. He's slicing like the thighs.
Yeah.
Like he knows where to make the kill blows.
Yeah.
He's not trying to kill him.
No, which was fascinating.
So the story, the parallel storyline, and I think maybe there is some like big point that I'm missing that I just don't love, is that instead of like, I am my father's son, instead of walking in, and I am my father's son, for Amsterdam is in a way, I am Bill the Butcher's son. Because he's following in Bill the Butcher's path.
Correct.
Right? But he doesn't kill him. And Bill the Butcher doesn't even try and kill him.
Right. Which was the really interesting thing to me is that how young was he at the beginning? 7, 8 years old?
Yeah, he was young.
And then he goes away for 16 years. And then he goes away, and then when he comes back, this incredibly powerful guy for terrible, terrible reasons, takes him under his wing and treats him probably better than anyone's ever treated him in his entire life.
Yes.
But he was so indoctrinated and so raised in this society of like father worship and radical religion, whatever, that in spite of the way he's being raised and the fact that he likes being around this guy, he has to continually remind himself, no, it is my job to kill him because he killed Dad. And despite the fact that Bill the Butcher revered Amsterdam's dad, And if Amsterdam had come to him and said, hey, I need to let you know, you were actually revering this guy who's my dad, Bill the Butcher would have been like, okay, what do you want to do about it? And he's like, I don't know. I feel like we need to have a conversation about it. And then, if they'd talked and used their words, but that's not a movie. But, like, at the end of the day, it's just like he reverts back to, I need to do this because it's my job to avenge my father, despite the fact that probably Bill the Butcher's treating him better than Liam Neeson ever did.
That's an interesting point.
And so one of the big things that I want to do that I think was really... that I think makes it a little bit more of an interesting, compelling story... not an interesting, compelling story. That's not the right thing to say. That makes it a different kind of story where it doesn't feel like the Amsterdam Valen character has just been brainwashed into believing this like culture of belief and masculinity. Is if the person who led the Irish community was his mother, not his father. And so the person who's killed by Bill the Butcher is his mom. And so part of why I want to do that is because he might be getting something from Bill the Butcher that he never got before, but it's not replacing this other potential thing. It's not competing dads. It's like kind of rival parents at the end. And because like we had 2 named female characters.
Yeah.
We had Cameron Diaz, and then we had the lady with the crazy teeth who was an alcoholic by the time Leonardo DiCaprio came back.
It was Maggie.
Yeah,
I liked Maggie.
I did not recast Maggie. But yeah, I gender swapped a couple of characters.
I actually went kind of the opposite. I was thinking in the opposite direction.
Oh.
We haven't made any final decisions yet, I suppose.
Of course not.
But I actually was thinking that I would like for it to be Priest Valen's daughter. I want Amsterdam to be a woman.
I'm 100% on board. Keep talking.
I told you that I'm bad with young actors. So Leo was probably around like 26.
Something like that.
When he played that role. And
sure.
I don't know many 26-year-old actors, let alone that are not A-list.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, I have a hard time finding actors and stuff. And, like, I found some people, but almost none of them are A-list. And that's exactly it we're not casting directors. It's hard to bring people in and have them read for a role to find out if they're good for it. So you are not wrong to say it is a difficult thing to do. It takes me literally hours.
I mean, I definitely feel like a couple of the girls on Never Have I Ever could have played the role. But...
Possibly. Are any of them Irish?
Oh, no. Sadie Sink.
I don't know who that is.
Sadie Sink was... God, what's her character's name in Stranger Things?
I'm unfamiliar with her, but she's 22, so it's the right age.
She's amazing.
Cool. Yeah, well, we'll return to that when we do casting. But I want to talk about plot first.
Okay, let's talk about plot.
You were thinking of making Amsterdam a lady.
Yes.
Why? Tell me about the arc that you envisioned for this particular character.
I think that it's first of all, there just weren't enough females.
I agree.
I also think that, when you're talking about like maternal versus paternal relationships, I think that, we actually did explore a little bit. So, Bill the Butcher basically raised Jenny.
Yes.
But he also had sex with her. Yeah,
that was weird. And, like, she has this moment where she's like, I want you to know that Bill the Butcher never touched me until I went to him first. And I'm like, I don't know that... What?
But, okay, so it bumped me the first time she said the line. But if she's, say, 14 years old at the time, and... she sees that a lot of the way that women are making money is through prostitution, or like really, if you look at that movie, all of the women in that movie, there was Jenny.
Yep.
Right? Jenny, and she was kind of a butterfly. She was unique. She was, whatever.
Yeah.
Then you have the gang of prostitutes.
Yep.
Who will only, they say only the pug uglies have the sand to sleep with these late women because they're so rough. They'll slit your throat in your sleep.
Yeah.
And then other than that, it's just, Maggie. So it's Jenny, Maggie, and the prostitutes.
Right.
So I can see that if most of your role models are just women who are having sex with the men, then at 14, thinking you need to survive, trying to become somebody's partner, trying to become somebody's concubine in a way. I could see Jenny doing that. But that's not a paternal relationship then.
Yeah, correct.
So I want to see Bill the Butcher's paternal relationship to a daughter. I think that's very different to a son. And I think almost, I mean, ultimately they will fight at the end.
Of course.
They have to fight. There's no way to take that out. But I think that's just an interesting thing to see. I'm not married to it.
Hey, I'm not opposed to it. I like the idea. I think that there were a lot of things that were kind of glanced by in the original movie, but because it is a historical epic, this is the way things were, and it was tough and hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of it also, the things that bumped me oftentimes were the language. Like, there were a lot of slurs thrown around, and there was a big part of Bill the Butcher's character was that he was deeply, deeply racist.
Yeah.
And it was like, yeah, he's deeply, deeply racist, but he's a horrible murderer, but he's not a bad guy. And I'm like, I don't... Okay, like, look, I understand that that's what you're going for. I do. And I understand that that's what the characters were at the time. And I understand that their version of Americanism and masculinity is that, like, I need to, protect exactly mine and my own.
Yeah.
But I think fundamentally, it's that logic and those examples taken to extreme that gives us a lot of the people on the right that we're dealing with now who have the exact same logic because Bill the Butcher and characters like him are the exact same people who are being idolized.
So this was kind of why I asked how historically accurate we have to be. I assumed that you would let us do some female characters. So I definitely have some gender swaps. And I will say that, like, for the dead rabbits in particular, because we're focusing on them, I think a lot of them were like Bowery Boys beforehand. I would love for some of those characters to be females. I also just think seeing female gang members or seeing female, equals.
Yeah.
I want to see female equals.
I agree.
But I also wonder, can we make this movie without racism?
I would love to make this movie without racism.
That was not enjoyable.
it was not. Like, I bring it up because I very much don't want it to be there.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of things I've learned that are negative about Hamilton and Lin-Manuel Miranda in the last couple years. But one of the things that it does very well is I love the colorblind casting of Hamilton. I think that's amazing because fuck it, why not? Like, if you were, like, that was the story that existed at the time, that's fine. But if you're telling a story to a modern audience, tell a story to a modern audience.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think this movie benefits from the fact that in the middle of this big revolution against the wealthy, the poor people also decided, you know what, we're taking out the rich, but you know who also we need to do? We also need to go lynch a bunch of black people. Yeah.
And that was, I felt like Jimmy Spoils in particular, like, well, first of all, like, there's that early scene where it's like the beginning of 1862, and Bill the Butcher throws a knife at a picture of Abraham Lincoln, who he also plays. So that's hilarious.
That is very funny.
D-Day plays both characters.
That's true.
So, but then McGloin goes and just starts beating up a bunch of black people, and we just move away from that. It just totally glazed over. And then in the end fight scene, like Jimmy Spoils is a black dead rabbit who just gets brutally murdered in the street.
Apart, yeah.
And we just kind of go past
it's
that.
Like, yeah, this sure was a horrible time, but we don't use that to say any sort of statement about our characters.
Yeah.
At which point, it's a distraction and a waste of time. In a 3-hour movie, if you're spending time pointing out, boy, these people sure also were racist, but then not identifying the fact that that's a problem and people shouldn't be like that anymore, then it doesn't serve your movie. I think it's a distraction. And for both of us, it was.
Yeah, and I think, like,
despite the fact, again, I know it's historically accurate, but, like, is the part of this that this historically accurate the story we're trying to tell? Or are we trying to paint the color of the world as that it's a harsh world? Because there's lots of ways to paint the color as a harsh world. And I also don't want to erase the fact that black people had a really shitty time. Like, you cannot erase that.
No, and I think it's interesting. Like, if I was going to make the argument for why it is in the movie, why it's so glazed over, because at the time, racism was so glazed over. So it's just there, and it's shocking, and it's awful. And but people just look right past it. And that's how it is in the movie. But I don't think that's something that I think in an ideal remake, maybe we avoid perpetrating that, because it's, to me, I always ask the question when making a commentary in a movie, are you showing how all these awful things were happening and nobody cared, or are you in fact glazing over it? So it's a fine line to walk. I always would rather just like not walk that line. Personally,
I also think it's important of who is going to idolize the characters you're creating,
right?
Because there's all these different stories about different movies that are created. Like I can't even think of the name of the movie right now. Where like the main character is like an American Nazi, but they made him look cool. So then now a bunch of Nazis legitimately look up to this character in a movie who is demonstrably the villain. And I can't remember the name of the movie.
Is it American History X?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that happens. Like, okay, cool. You told your story, but then you created this character that the people who aren't going to pay attention to nuance are going to be like, yeah, fucking that guy. And I feel like Bill the Butcher is legitimately going to be idolized by exactly the sort of people that D-Day would hate to be idolized by.
I love Bill the Butcher. Right. Like, I watched that movie and I thought, so I will say, Maggie Spellman wrote an amazing pilot called Staten Island Quarantine War, and it is about this time, and some of these characters are in this pilot, and it's not about racism, it's not about but it's so beautiful and so historically accurate, and like you just get the vibe of the time when you read it. And I don't typically write, I write comedy, and I do write some period pieces, but I don't typically write like something like that historical and that kind of gritty. But I read this by this young, intelligent woman, and then I watched Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York, and a couple times, the first time I watched Gangs of New York, I was like, Maggie could totally write this.
I mean,
Maggie could totally write this. She definitely could. And I thought, like, why don't I write something like this? Like, I love Gangs of New York. I love The Gentleman, Guy Ritchie's The Gentleman.
I've seen it.
I'm also a big Matthew McConaughey and Tom Hardy fan, so it was all,
all the
another perfect movie. Near perfect movie. But I wanted to write something like that. Like, I, loved... And when I was thinking about recasting this, I thought, like, how are we going to recast D-Day? Like, he carries so much of that movie.
It's true.
But then also, like, thinking about all of the awful things he does, like, do I love Bill the Butcher? Why do I love Bill the Butcher? So he is a character that I think, because he's so cool and he has the villain's code of ethics. He has his own code of ethics that he lives by. Yeah. Right? He loves the priest. Yep. And he definitely, he says at one point, he says at the beginning, okay, when after he kills the priest and Monk McGinn goes to take his money, Bill the Butcher says, it's fair, a bit indelicate, but fair. Yeah. So he definitely has his own code of ethics. And that's what makes an amazing villain. It's true. It's this guy this person who just believes so fiercely in what they're doing. They think it's right. They think it's the right thing.
Always going to be something compelling and charismatic about a human being who believes that every choice they've ever made is correct.
So, then my question is, what is Bill's code of ethics? Because his spine has been so much true Americans, right? The natives.
It's true.
So what is he fighting for? I mean, I think there is just the very basic, he owns the 5 points.
He does.
Right? And being kind of, I mean, if I thought about it this way at one point. I thought about, like, what if Priest Vallon had won? What would the 5 points look like? Would Priest Vallon, it actually, Monk McGinn at one point says, I always worried that if Priest Vallon won, he would, or kept going, kept getting bigger, he would keep wanting more. So my question is, does a 5 points that live under the priest look like nobody is paying dues, nobody's paying off the gangs, the police aren't under the thumb? Like, is that all because of Bill the Butcher, right? Is that his thing? Is his thing just power? Because power over people does not necessarily, I mean...
The way I see Bill the Butcher is that I think he sees himself as the neighborhood butcher. I think he's carved a circle in the sand of, this is me and mine, this is my space, these are my people. Yeah. And anything that comes in that isn't him and his people is a threat to his perfect little world and his perfect little circle. Dangerous narcissism, all those fun things. Yeah. But, like, I think that fundamentally is, like, if you want to provide a reason for his racism of, it wasn't people that were in his little circle at the beginning, so they don't belong in there now. It is just, he had this perfect idealized vision of what this space was.
Right.
And I think that in his own perfect world, he wouldn't need to kill anybody. He would just be the neighborhood butcher chopping up meat and handing it out to all the people, and everyone would say, "Good morning, Mr. the Butcher. Good morning, person who was born here, will live their entire life here, and will die here." And he just likes his own little world as its own private little thing, and he doesn't want to think about the fact that he's actually a part of a planet as opposed to that tiny little circle. I think, as opposed to the movie Big Fish, I think Bill the Butcher wants to be the big fish in the tiny pond.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to think about how much smaller he would be in the ocean.
Yeah. That sounds right.
And because he's so committed and he's so convinced of his convictions and he has his image of this world in his head, that he will, like, anytime any piece is bent out of place, he will hammer it back in. He will slice it off if he has to keep his perfect little circle. And that's who I think Bill the Butcher is.
Yeah. That's really good boiling it down.
Thank you.
He also had a father trauma, too. Though he lost his father, remember?
I don't remember. Tell me.
His father died in a war. I'm
he died in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah, he died in the Revolutionary War.
Yeah,
so
he died making this country. Bill the Butcher's father died so that Bill the Butcher could live.
Yeah, I mean, that's not, like, really a good reason to be, like, killing all the Irish.
No, it's not. But, like, we don't... One of the things that isn't really talked about in the movie, and certainly isn't talked about now, is that fundamentally, people were just as racist to the Irish as they were to any other race.
Yeah.
And the benefit that the Irish had is that sometimes they could figure out a way to blend in, and sometimes they could not.
Yeah.
And that's certainly something that is happening in this movie, but it's not really being called out, and I don't know that I have a place for it in our version, but, like... So let's start with our version.
Okay.
Do you want our version to start with the big fight between Bill the Butcher's gang and Priest Valen's gang?
I would say yes, but I'm also open to...
Well, because before you talked about how potentially spending more time with Priest Valen as a character first before we lose Liam Neeson forever.
I don't necessarily think that. I actually think he is in it the right amount.
Okay.
I just think that the nature of the film changes at some point. So, which is to say, like, it almost feels like two different movies to me.
Okay.
There are two different storylines in the movie, and they're not
I
super
agree.
cohesive. Like, it kind of one peters out, and then the next peters in. And I feel this, like actually really do, like, okay.
Let me support that a little bit.
Okay.
I think when Amsterdam first gets to town, we have this whole setup where he's going and figuring out and learning everything about this big event that Bill the Butcher is going to be having, where he's planning on taking him out, where he's planning on killing the king.
Yeah.
But that all happens in a short monologue at the beginning, and then we spend a bunch of time developing his relationship with Bill the Butcher.
Yes.
And I think what needs to be happening is that those two things need to be happening simultaneously.
I agree.
What I think needs to happen, because I tend to agree, I think we need to have this big fight at the beginning, because, again, it's a historical epic, it's a historical drama, and...
It's the why.
It's the why. It is literally the inciting incident for the rest of the movie. And I think it's reasonable. I don't have any notes about it, other than maybe don't show someone tearing someone's cheek, oh my god. Unless you want more gore.
I mean, I am personally a fan of gore, but I also am fine without it.
We can do other gore, just don't do that one.
As well, okay, I'll give you, we can take out the cheek ripping as long as we can keep Hellcat Maggie
biting someone's ear or nose off?
Like, she just has there's this one shot of her, like, flying through the air like a witch with these claws on her hands.
Hell yeah, fully on board.
That shot.
Absolutely,
okay.
We get to have that shot. But what I was going to say is that we get Amsterdam into town, and we have him start with nothing. And I think he needs to, like, because he kind of almost immediately learns about this event that Bill the Butcher does every year, honoring the fact that it was the anniversary of this big fight.
Right. And
I think that needs to be something we learn about at the end of Act 1.
When do we learn about it now?
Right at the beginning. Like,
yeah.
before Amsterdam even meets Bill the Butcher.
Okay.
And then, because you move to this town, you move to Bill the Butcher's little circle, no one comes in unless Bill the Butcher approves of them. So he has to say, hey, I'm new in town. I know that I can't live here without your approval, so I'm coming here to ask your approval. And so then we get to start building up Amsterdam being a part of Bill the Butcher's gang. As he learns more about Bill the Butcher, it's like, oh man, I'm learning so much about him, I can use this against him. Oh wait, I'm learning so much about him, but he's also taking care of me. And so we get to have these competing storylines happening within Amsterdam over the course of the movie.
So my question is, in this version, is his getting to know, because what happens is he shows up. Yeah. He immediately has a fight with Johnny and Jimmy Spoils.
Yes.
His friend Johnny from back in the day.
Yes.
Right? And then Johnny.
From when they were 7.
Right. And then Johnny, who, by the way, like, I didn't know there were emo boys in 1862, but he is like giving Panic at the Disco.
He is the emoest boy.
He is by far the most emo boy. And then Johnny kind of gives him the lay of the land and takes him. Like, he follows Johnny to meet Bill the Butcher. It's not intentional that he's meeting Bill the Butcher in Martin Scorsese's version. So my question is it intentional? Or...
It feels a little bit intentional. Like, Johnny goes, we gotta go see Bill. And then they go and see Bill.
Yeah.
Because they have to, like, pay tribute or something. Because after John C. Reilly shows up and robs these guys...
John C. Reilly.
Did I say
so
that?
Good. Yeah, no, it's so good that he's in this movie. Like,
it's
he's not the person you'd expect.
That caught me so off guard. But yeah, and Johnny C shows up and, like, takes their money and is just, like, a shitty cop. And, like, well, this is everything we have left. We have to go take it, too.
Yeah.
And, like, because there's that moment where Amsterdam saves Johnny from the fire, and there's a bunch of other stuff that's going on, which is fine. I don't have a problem with any of that. But I just kind of, like, it's a heist movie, basically. It's a heist movie until it's a war movie.
Yeah.
And the heist goes wrong, as all heists are wont to do. Because I think we need to learn about and get and assemble all the pieces. And we need to pay so much attention because finally it comes time for Amsterdam to, like, it's the night of the anniversary. All this stuff's going on. But Bill the Butcher's somewhat expecting it to happen. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my god, he knows. I have to do this right now because otherwise he's going to kill me. But he knows and it doesn't work.
But does Amsterdam know he knows?
There's a moment when they're in that hall, and Amsterdam looks over and sees someone get grabbed and dragged away. And I don't really remember how or why or who or what that person was supposed to do. I just know that Amsterdam saw someone get dragged away, and then all of a sudden goes, oh shit, I have to do this now.
Oh.
And
God, there's so much in that movie. They've really packed, and that's a wild thing because I'm like,
it's a dense 3-hour movie.
There's so much in it. Like, you could truly make, like, we could do, like, I thought in this remake, like, do we want it to be shorter? But also, I think it could be longer. Like, there's so much that's not built out enough.
It does not need to be 3 hours long. There's a lot going on in this movie. Like, there's a lot of things that kind of contribute to the fact that Johnny is just so smart and so clever. Like, there's that, when they go... And Bill the Butcher gives Johnny the assignment of, you have to go rob this ship before this other gang robs the ship. And they go rob the ship. The other gang was there. And there's nothing for them. They have nothing to show for it. But then that guy who's dying comes out, fires his gun in the air, and falls over. And then... Amsterdam goes, oh, well, we'll take him with us and we'll sell him to the body snatchers or whatever. Which is absolutely a real thing. That absolutely is a real thing that happened. There's dollops about it. It's great. Dollop is another podcast. It's very fun. How on earth would Johnny know that? He's been in town for a day or two.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I'm sorry. We do this whole big setup to, like, show that Johnny's so smart and so clever and to endear himself to Bill the Butcher. And I just don't think that's necessary because I also don't believe it. Like, he's new in town. He's, like, despite the fact that, yes, he grew up here, he was 7 years old. He spent... nearly twice as long, more than twice as long as he lived in New York back somewhere else.
So how does he earn? So this is like the series of events, right?
Great. Good question.
We've got, he shows up to town. He reclaims his knife. Johnny shows him around town, tells him the different gangs, lists all the different gangs, which I find really interesting. But honestly, I guess that part could be cut because there are a lot of gangs and we don't see them later. But, okay, maybe a little bit. Anyway, so Johnny shows him the gangs. They see the fire. They go into the fire. They get
the music box.
And the music box that he never ends up giving to her. And
no.
I mean, it's just to show us that he loves Jenny.
Yeah.
And
fine.
And
what's a movie without a love triangle for some reason?
Yeah.
Despite the fact that the actual love triangle is Amsterdam, Jenny, and Bill. Continue.
That's true. And, well, I mean, it's a 3-hour movie. You can have 2 love triangles.
Technically, it's a love square.
Is there like a minute per love triangle ratio? Like once the movie gets over an hour and a half, you have to have a second love triangle?
I don't remember that part of Save the Cat, but I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
Gets to town, runs into Johnny, learns about the gangs. There's a fire. He goes in with Johnny to loot, and then they take the winnings to the Bowery Boys, I think.
Yeah.
And then he goes to pay tribute to Bill.
Yeah.
They rob the ship.
Yeah.
They take the dead body from the ship, and that's when Bill the Butcher's like, okay, this guy's smart. He has a fight with McGloin to show that he's powerful, to show that he can take out one of their existing members, that he can fight, and then Bill the Butcher becomes invested in him, right? And
yeah, so that's what happens in the movie as it exists.
Right, as it exists. And I think that the fire is important because Bill the Butcher is sitting outside watching him save Johnny. So that's another reason why he becomes invested in him. So my question is, in our version, why is Bill invested in
I think that we
Amsterdam?
Can take it back, and I think Amsterdam can still be very smart, but I don't think he necessarily needs to be these streets smart. Like, I think that we can take something from later in the movie and move it earlier.
Okay.
And because the fire is nice, we get this element, we get this kind of thematic thing of the music box as it carries forward of Johnny really has this thing. It's like his only thing that he owns in his entire life of value, and he wants to give it to Jenny, but she's not interested. And I think that's very sad. But I also, this isn't relevant, but I absolutely gender swapped Johnny.
Of course you did.
Of course I did. But the thing that I would take from later in the movie is I would take the boxing match and move it earlier.
Yeah.
Because we have this whole big thing, this big boxing match that then gets shut down by, again, the thing that I thematically care about is the rich people. And Bill's like, I paid you off. He's like, no, you paid off them. You didn't pay off these other guys. And I think that's the thing where Amsterdam can come up and Bill can be like, who the fuck are you? Why are you talking to us? And Amsterdam can be like, wait. Where does the city end? You said it's this other guy's. You can still have this fight if you do it 500 feet that way.
Yeah.
Because it's outside their jurisdiction. And then Bill and this other guy can go, that's true. And all of a sudden, Amsterdam has saved Bill a lot of money. And Bill goes,
yeah,
that was really smart. Good job, kid. And you were brave enough to come talk to me. That I could have killed you for that. And Amsterdam's like, I know, but I could have died. I could have just as easily died in this whole big raid too. It's a tough world. We can die at any time. Okay. And Bill's like, now you're speaking my language.
So he shows up, meets Amsterdam, or meets Johnny, runs into Johnny.
The two of them start doing shenanigans and doing low-level grunt work, which is just... But in doing low-level grunt work, we get to know the city as it exists now. The low-level grunt work serves two purposes. He and Johnny become friends. We get to know the city. And then finally, they get the job of go be bodyguards at this boxing match.
Okay.
And then that's the boxing match where he finally gets to meet Bill, this person who's loomed large, who we'll see in passing throughout other parts of the movie, and he never gets to really get to know this guy because he's Bill the Butcher. Right. No one talks to Bill the Butcher. No one without merit gets to talk to Bill the Butcher. Right. And then we get to have this one where he proves his merit to Bill the Butcher, and now Bill the Butcher brings him into that circle, and we see him move off with Bill, and Johnny get left behind. And so we then get to have this competing thing of he getting closer to Johnny, or him getting closer to Bill the Butcher. He's learning about Bill, becoming closer to Bill, while also, as he's learning things about Bill, also plotting how he's going to try to take out Bill. He sees the picture of his parent. He sees how Bill idolizes Priest Valen. We see all these different things, and the movie kind of progresses in the same way that we expect until we then also meet Jenny.
So that was going to be my question: is if we have this like love triangle, or
trapezoid, whatever you want to call it,
a parental love triangle
sure.
of Bill the Butcher with Johnny and Amsterdam,
Johnny, Jenny, all the things.
Is Jenny? What role does Jenny play? Is Jenny still, a source of conflict between Johnny and Amsterdam?
I think that Jenny can be a source of conflict between Johnny and Amsterdam, but I think Jenny and Bill somewhat serve a similar purpose of they're showing Amsterdam a life that he could have if he kind of leaves this notion of revenge behind. And because he eventually kind of turns his back on Bill offering this parental relationship. He kind of turns his back on Jenny offering a life, a home, and a family in favor of doing revenge in a war. And because Jenny, too, is saying, hey, we can go somewhere else and we can be happy. But you're choosing to wage a war instead. And I think that that's what Jenny's character is supposed to do. You're making a face. What's happening?
I don't know. This is my cut everything brain.
Please.
And I wouldn't have said this, a moment before now. But I'm just thinking, like, if we have other female characters within the gang. Because I do like... Another reason I like Amsterdam being female is I like a queer love triangle. So, like...
Great.
Her having... The potential her having a relationship with Jenny is good to me. But also, part of me is now wondering how much we need Jenny. Because if I'm going to be frank, which I'm about to be, I think she's kind of the token female.
She is.
I don't think she has. I think that there are some really cool things about her. I do love the turtle dove that she dresses up like a maid and then goes into the house and robs them. I think that's really interesting. I think it's cool that we learn about the different types of looting. I do think it's neat to see, her bumping into men and they think she's flirting and she picks their pockets. But I also think, I guess my question is, can we either cut Jenny or can Jenny be combined with one of the Bowery boys and just be another gang member so we can see that?
I think that is a good question. And a frivolous love triangle, I agree, is exactly that, frivolous. I think by going through and gender swapping and doing other things and allowing women to have allowing women to be in this movie, basically, we will eliminate the fact that Jenny is kind of the token woman. Because I think at the end of the day, there needs to be something special about her. And I think it's even more apparent if Amsterdam is surrounded by men, women, all these sorts of people, and he or she just simply is not interested until he meets this one person. Because largely the goal of this movie is, I am this one person, I have this one goal. And I think there do need to be the parallel draws of the other things that you could choose to do.
Right.
I think Jenny also serves the purpose of giving us more flavor and color to the world. Like, otherwise it would just be all a storyline the whole way through, and we need something a little bit else.
I wonder if Jenny can be somebody who the relationship is... So one thing I did not like about that relationship is, like, Leo is, like... Amsterdam is pretty violent towards Jenny.
He's not a good dude, and I don't know why she keeps going back.
So, like, maybe
She keeps going back because he's the main character, and it sucks.
Maybe he can be... Maybe that relationship can be... Like, I like Jenny being a pickpocket, obviously, but, like, maybe she can be someone who's, like, while he's establishing relationships, like his relationship with Johnny.
You know what we also could do?
Johnny can be Jenny.
No, what I was going to suggest is... What Johnny is really missing in the course of this entire movie was what he's really missing is a co-conspirator.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just him, the special boy, lone wolf, doing his own thing, fighting to right the wrongs and avenge his dad.
Amsterdam. Johnny is the best friend.
Yes, I said Johnny, I meant Amsterdam. I apologize.
Yes.
And I feel like what we can do is we can steal something else from later in the movie of we can have at some point Act 1 to Act 2 or whatever, we can have someone take a shot at Bill and Amsterdam saves Bill, and then it turns out the person who took a shot at Bill is Jenny. And then Amsterdam goes and, like, saves and, like, protects and does all these different things to save Bill, and it turns out that it was Jenny that did this thing. And so now all of a sudden he has someone else who also clearly wants revenge on Bill. And then it finds out that this person is also kind of Bill's pseudo-child, which I don't necessarily think we need in this movie.
Yeah.
But I think if you give Amsterdam the co-conspirator of someone else who doesn't fit Bill's version of a perfect world, his perfect little town.
Yeah.
And as such, Bill has tried to, like, exorcise them from the town. That could be someone who also is like, I have been hurt by this before. Because all of a sudden, as soon as Bill brands Amsterdam and, like, sends him out into the world, all these different people rise up out of the, like, corners to be like, hey, you seem like a dude worth following. We're all going to congeal around you.
Right.
Despite the fact that that's the literal exact opposite of what Bill was trying to do.
Right. So, like, showing in a way that there is already some...
Yeah. And I think that...
distaste.
And literally they can bond over the fact that they both want this guy dead.
Yeah.
And she can hate Amsterdam at first because he stopped her from killing Bill, and then he can point out that she wouldn't have killed him in the first place because from this distance, this gun, and he can even go back, take the gun, fire it at a pillar, because it's like an old gun from the 1800s. He fires it at a pillar, and it just kind of like glances off and doesn't deal enough damage because it's a tiny little pea shooter.
Well, and I think an interesting thing about the actual, like, that in the movie, in D-Day's version, in the Martin Scorsese version, is that, Monk takes Amsterdam, is somewhere in the back of the theater and says, like, he knows that Amsterdam is the priest's son.
Knows.
He knew. I mean, he knew when he pulled his hat off in the square to look at his face. Yeah. Like, he knew immediately.
Yeah.
He says, you're not. What are you doing? Like, this is not in like line with your father's belief. Like, you're fighting. Like, you're hurting your own people. And I think it's important to Monk essentially reminds Amsterdam what he's there for. Because Amsterdam is actually, like, not sure he is defending Bill for the right reason. Like, he actually loves Bill.
Yeah.
Amsterdam loves Bill.
Yeah.
So I think, like, for him to... I think that is important, that he's actually saving Bill because he wants to save Bill at first. So I think that he can kind of explore that. He can explore, like, having gone in that direction... if he has to, like, essentially recourt a friendship that he, like, realizes that he's broken someone's trust.
I completely agree, especially because, like, it's this moment where you don't have time to think, you just act on instinct, and his instinct said, save Bill.
Right.
And then he has this, like, in the movie as it exists, he has this moment afterwards was like, why did I do that?
Yeah.
Like, this could have all been over. It could have been so easy if I just let this thing happen. But, like, he had his instincts say, save this person who's being kind to me and is I'm looking up to. But I have to mentally make myself choose violence, revenge, all these different things. And I think that is interesting. And I think if we get that a lot earlier,
right,
we get to see it becomes harder and harder for him to have to continually make that choice.
Yes. And I think it's interesting because that way he also, I think that I don't think that he, like, we hear a lot of Bill the Butcher's, like, why?
Yeah.
Because he just says whatever he wants, whenever he wants to,
That is correct.
But we don't get a lot of Amsterdam's why, because he doesn't really have anyone who he's super verbal with. Like, he's not particularly verbal with Johnny.
He does not talk a lot in the movie.
So I think that, like, giving him Jenny earlier and maybe less violently and maybe as someone who is on his side.
Yeah.
Like, the violence can be redirected towards Bill and not at each other, because it's weird for them to, like, stick knives at each other's throats and then, like
that can be how they first meet. It's the whole superhero thing of, like, I hate you, we have to fight. It turns out we're on the same side. Cool.
Yeah.
And, like, I think that, like, especially when one of them doubts themselves, it's the other that gets them to kind of, like, realign to the quote-unquote mission. And I think that that's important. I think you need to have someone to talk to. I think you need to have someone on your side, because otherwise you're just a lone gunman in the night.
Yeah.
What the hell is that?
And Johnny is with the Bowery Boys when the Bowery Boys come to the Dead Rabbits, right? Leo's in the church, Amsterdam's in the church.
Yeah, yeah.
And they all come in together. So I also think that, like, Jenny can lead the Bowery Boys.
Yeah, I think that Jenny is the person who knows the town, probably knows the town better than anybody. Yeah. And is the one who brings everyone together to be like, hey, I know why you would join this cause. I know why you would join this cause. And then we get this instead of Amsterdam being like, so why were we doing this on our own? She was like, because I didn't want any of these people to die. Yeah. I love everyone here. And I thought that anyone here who went after him individually was going to die. I thought I was going to die. Right. But if we all stand up together, none of us have to die.
Yeah. I love that.
And I think that's our movie.
Yeah.
Which brings us...
Wait, but can we do the end? Redo the end?
Sure. What do you have in mind for the end?
Can we just have the end not be on the Nights of the Riot? And can we have Amsterdam just actually kill Bill?
Yes. Okay. I think killing Bill is an important part of any movie.
Yeah, I don't want Shrapnel to kill Bill. I want Amsterdam to kill Bill. Jenny.
I think it needs to be Amsterdam or Jenny. I mean, if you want the truly tragic story, they kill each other. Yeah. But if you want the cinema of it all... I think it needs to parallel the beginning of the movie, and I think you need to have similar shots where Amsterdam ends up killing Bill in the same sort of way that Bill ended up killing Priest Valen.
Yeah.
And I think you can kind of have elements of this story happened once, it's just going to keep happening over and over again.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that I don't think Bill has any kids, and I don't think we should introduce Bill having kids. I think that's way on the nose.
Yeah.
But, like, there's other people who looked up to Bill. Like, I also think that, like, you do this thing, and I think what's important is to see the moments after, because I think we have this big fight, this big showdown, and I think you have another 5 to 10 minutes of the movie of all the same people who paid tribute to Bill being like, oh, okay. And now they pay tribute to Amsterdam, and it's just like, what? It's just business as normal. It's just another gang boss.
Because in a way, like, thinking about it, I did wonder, why did Amsterdam not kill Bill? And I think that it breaks the cycle by him not killing Bill. But I would say that to me is weak because he would have killed Bill. He just wasn't a good enough fighter, or wasn't. Well,
we don't know how good a fighter he was, because Bill was fighting in smoke, which is something that I guess Bill knew how to fight in and Amsterdam didn't, because we know Amsterdam's a good fighter.
Or maybe his heart really wasn't supposed to be in it.
That's exactly it. I think having it the same night as the riots or whatever,
right,
clouds what we actually can be doing of the rich paying half of the poor people to kill the other half.
Right.
And I think that's what we're going to end up needing to see we see the tides turning, we see the crowds turning against Bill, and then we see the money going that way as well.
Right.
Because it's just being like, oh, well, you're going to be the future. Sure. You run it, but you make sure that I get my cut.
Yeah. I think that it seems like maybe the chain was supposed to be broken, but I think that it's a stronger message if the chain is not broken. And I also felt like I also think
that makes it more of a tragedy.
It does. And I also think the chain being broken, because it was in so much, like, it was just, like, tacked onto the end. Like, I feel like if the story was going to be the chain being broken, it would need to be, like, a stronger change in the storyline and feel more intentional. Like, it didn't feel, like, super intentional. It felt very... like, that, I think, is, like, probably my least favorite part of the movie. So I think, anyway, yes, let's do it. Where Amsterdam kills Bill the Butcher, people pay tribute to Amsterdam, the cycle just goes on. Because that, to me, is, yes, it's more of a tragedy. You're right. It's definitely more of a tragedy. And it does go in line with the theme of our movie, which is, basically the rich pitting the poor against the poor. Yeah.
And, like, we can even have that be a real theme of... any time that Amsterdam starts thinking that he's not going to be interested in doing this, like, Boss Tweed or someone else can be like, no, you can do this. Here's a little bit more money.
Yeah.
Because the more they're distracted with each other, the less they're paying attention to the fact that people are being drafted or this, that, the other thing to go fight the rich people war, which I don't necessarily need, but something along those lines. We don't need to go into it now, but something like that.
Yeah.
We have a movie. We've done it. But now we have to cast that movie.
Okay, let's cast it.
So I think we have to start with Amsterdam Valen, and I think Sadie Sink is a good choice. I have nothing against Sadie Sink. Let me tell you about who I have, and then we'll make our choice.
Okay.
The actor that I had for this is an actor named Art Parkinson. He was Rickon in Game of Thrones. He was also in The Bay, and he's the voice of Kubo in Kubo and the Two Strings. He's a young Irish actor who has been acting for pretty much his whole life at this point. And, I thought that he could do the kind of job of new Leo D, whatever I called him earlier.
Okay, that's an interesting choice. I like Sadie Sink better, personally.
Great, we'll go with Sadie Sink. I think that's more interesting, and I agree. So let's talk about Bill the Butcher.
Okay.
Who'd you have for Bill the Butcher?
Oh, I hope it's okay. I do have an A-list actor for Bill the Butcher.
That's fine. It's Bill the Butcher. I kind of expected.
D-Day is like a huge name, so this person has to carry D-Day's weight. I had Tom Hiddleston as Bill the Butcher.
Interesting.
I think he would be an amazing Bill the Butcher. I think he's got this kind of like, while having like this, he's like this like tall, like, he's got the kind of vibe, like the tall, like kind of almost like there's this moment, I actually like wrote it down because I loved it so much. But it basically, when Bill the Butcher is an asshole, Daniel Day-Lewis just smiles, and he's got like
Yeah.
this young, kind of almost childlike giddiness. And I think that is something that Tom Hiddleston really has. I also think he's just a phenomenal actor that could bring it.
I think that's a wonderful choice. I don't know. Because one of the things that I found really interesting is that we have this guy who sees himself as like the most American guy, whatever. And Daniel Day-Lewis is British, right?
Yeah.
And Tom Hiddleston is British, right?
That's what you need as a British actor to play a true American.
Yeah, that and so I'm like, I wanted someone who kind of captured the vibe of Bill the Butcher, because I wanted someone who could play incredibly jovial and kind and just sees himself as the neighborhood butcher, and then he flips the switch and is the scariest motherfucker you've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I thought someone who, I mean, as long as we're pulling from Stranger Things, I thought David Harbour would actually be a really good Bill the Butcher.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Because, like fundamentally, you can look at him and he's just like, oh yeah, no. Let me get you a cut of meat for your family. That's fine. And let me give this to you. Go with my blessing. And he turns to someone and says, I need to make sure that you kill everyone in this person's family, and I need there to be exactly 0 survivors. And if you don't do it, you're next. What kind of meat would you like? And I think that he can play those two different, the duality, because I think he would give us a different kind of Bill the Butcher, that still accomplishes what Bill the Butcher does.
Oh, he's a totally different kind of Bill the Butcher.
He is, and I think that's important.
Because
no one will ever be better than Daniel Day-Lewis at being Daniel Day-Lewis. So we need a different kind.
I think the thing about, I think the thing that I don't like about David Harbour is the thing you do like about David Harbour, which is that, like, he really looks like Daniel Day-Lewis looks like a gentleman.
Yeah.
You know, and David Harbour looks like a brute.
He does.
Like, he looks like he could whoop your ass. Like, Daniel Day-Lewis is the guy who's, he's clearly had to train because he's a little bit...
He's svelte.
Yeah.
But I think that's exactly it. I think Bill the Butcher should be a butcher. And butchers, like, have to carry around huge slabs of meat, and they have to wield axes. And, like, part of what makes them effective at their job is the raw muscle to be able to cut things in half. I would push us to David Harbour between these two.
Oh my gosh, this is... I guess, like, you are the boss of Ideal Remake, so you get to decide. But I definitely think Tom Hiddleston is...
I think if we're looking for someone to do the same sort of thing that we had Bill the Butcher do in the first movie, I do think Tom Hiddleston is the better choice.
Yeah.
But I think I don't want to do the same thing intentionally. Yeah. And so that's why I think David Harbour can play the same sort of character, but in a very different way. And that's why I would push us in that direction.
Okay. We got David Harbour. There we go.
So
it has to be ideal for both of us. It can't just be ideal for me.
It's true. Tell me about... Oh, you went first for the last one. So let me tell you about my Jenny Everdeen.
Okay. I don't have many more characters, just so you know. So you might be casting most of this.
Okay. I put in a lot of time and effort trying to find Irish people. And every once in a while, there's a character that doesn't have to be Irish. And I'm just like, hell yeah. So for this character, I cast a young actress in her early 20s. She's in something called Float Like a Butterfly. She's in something called Sanctuary at Witch's Tale. And she's also like the main voice on Unicorn Warriors Eternal.
Okay.
Her name is Hazel Dupe.
She's a cutie.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for.
I had a slightly different direction, a thought of a slightly different direction for her.
Sure, tell me.
Which maybe could be for the Amsterdam character. I was thinking about some women of color for this role.
Good. I love that. So tell me more.
I don't know if I was thinking of there are 2 actors I love from Never Have I Ever.
Okay.
And I'm trying to get the second one's name because I have Megan Surrey, who plays a smaller role on Never Have I Ever, but I think that she could do, I don't know if she's queer, but I know she can do a good queer, as well as Lee Rodriguez, who I think might be too old. No, she's 24 years old.
Okay, so between those two, pick one.
For
Jenny.
Okay, we're going to go Lee Rodriguez.
Okay. What else has Lee Rodriguez done? Is it just Never Have I Ever? That's really the thing you know her from?
I know her from Never Have I Ever. Apparently she has also done The Good Doctor, and she's done 1 episode of The Good Doctor and 1 episode of Grownish. So the only recurring role is Never Have I Ever.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that that's really her breakout. And that's fair, that's fine. What kind of character does she play on Never Have I Ever?
She plays a nerd who is the head of the robotics team, and she's queer.
Okay.
But
those are the two facts you know. Those are the three facts you know about her.
I mean, she has I could tell you the season conflicts she has with the protagonist in Never Have I Ever, but I don't think you want to know that. She's just really nerdy.
When I ask these questions, I'm asking, what are the characteristics about her that you think would make her an ideal Jenny? What are the similarities that you see between the character she's capable of playing that gives her a lead into playing Jenny Everdeen?
Does it have to be? I mean, I think this would be...
Because remember, we have a different version of Jenny Everdeen.
This would be a different role for her, I think. But
yeah.
She's absolutely stunning. Okay? She definitely has... I think Jenny needs to have a look.
Okay.
And I think that's important for Jenny is Lee Rodriguez plays a nerdy super, super, super nerdy character.
Yeah.
Who is the stereotype of a male nerd.
Sure.
She can rival that with being a female nerd.
Okay.
Super nerdy. But she's also this just stunning young woman who I think could play both. Jenny has to play both super alluring and be a total badass.
That's true.
Right? So she is conning men by the appearance of being different than who she is.
And I think the other thing that I'm fishing for, but I'm not catching, is her name is Lee Rodriguez.
Yeah.
Her photo on IMDb is her with a massive afro.
Yeah.
She is not going to fit into the perfect world or whatever of certainly the current version of Bill the Butcher.
Yeah.
And so because of that, she is going to resent and try to take out this person who's trying to keep everyone looking and being and seeming the same. Because she's not the same. She's Lee Rodriguez.
Yeah, I wasn't going to give you that.
No. But anyway, we'll go with Lee Rodriguez. That's great. The next person that I have is Boss Tweed. Do you have anyone for that?
I don't have anyone for Boss Tweed.
This is where I put my A-lister.
Okay, let's hear it.
I wanted someone who was just a real piece of shit. But a charming piece of shit. But is so, especially within the last few years, is so good at playing just the obnoxious, pampered, entitled, obnoxious guy that we're just we like you, but also fuck you.
Yeah.
And who better to play that than Hugh Grant?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I love that.
It's the expected rich guy, but also as soon as anyone holds up a fist to him, he's just a tiny little, he's no, you don't understand. I'm willing to do whatever you want. Oh my God. And Hugh Grant's so good at that. He's been doing that in so many different things recently, and
I love it.
He's so good at it.
I love it.
So
totally.
I thought Hugh Grant would be a fun Boss Tweed.
I'm for Boss Tweed. I'm for Hugh Grant as Boss Tweed. I'm for it.
The next person I have is Happy Jack.
Okay,
who's the Irish cop
yeah.
For the people listening.
Oh, for the people listening.
Who was on Priest Valen's side and then becomes a shitty cop.
Right.
That gets taken out by Amsterdam. Did you have someone for Happy Jack?
I don't have anyone. I mean, I have an off the cuff for Happy Jack, but let's hear your...
I wanted someone who needs to be Irish. Because that's the whole thing. And so I went with an actor who is a very charming actor, but also can play malicious and evil. Which makes sense because he was Moriarty in Sherlock.
Oh my gosh, Andrew Scott!
Yeah.
I'll take Andrew Scott for anything. I actually wish he had we're going to have Happy Jack's going to have to have a big role if it's Andrew Scott.
Well, that's exactly it, because I think, we kind of tease him in the version that we have, but, I think that he can do a lot more running around for Boss Tweed, because he is someone who goes from having this courage of his convictions, believing in things, and then just doing whatever he can for the money. And it's just this shift between the two different characters that he plays in the same movie. And I think Andrew Scott's really good at that.
I'm a huge Andrew, a massive Andrew Scott fan.
Great.
So I'm that just totally works for me.
Perfect. Good. Then let's go with that. The next one that I have is Walter McGinn, the elected sheriff.
Oh yeah, I have a casting.
Please tell me, because
for Monk McGinn.
Monk McGinn.
I want a gender swap Monk McGinn.
So do I.
I want him to be Kathy Bates. I think Kathy Bates would be a phenomenal Monk McGinn.
What an interesting choice. Why Kathy Bates?
I mean, she's just, she really can go to this deep emotional internal place. I feel I'm thinking a little bit of, oh God, what's the Stephen King movie that she holds the guy hostage in the basement?
Misery.
Misery. Like, I think she has this ability to play, like, happy and jovial, but I also think she has this ability to play a character who has this, like, massive internal conflict. I don't believe she's Irish.
I don't think she is.
But I think she would be perfect for the role.
I mean,
also,
let's find out.
Also, I think, like, she has, like, the Monk has to come head-to-head with Butcher.
It's true.
So, who, you know, and has 44 notches.
Kathy Bates is Irish.
Fuck yeah, Kathy Bates! Woo! I mean, 44 notches. I think Monk McGinn is one of my favorite characters. He has 44 notches in his staff, so he knows what he owes to the ferryman when he crosses over.
Yeah.
He is a fierce killer who has his own set of beliefs, and he ultimately he's a brute, but ultimately decides to try and talk it out with Bill the Butcher in the end and gets stabbed in the back. Literally a knife thrown in his back.
Yeah, there's a moment where it's like, he's trying to be the bigger man, and I appreciate that, but never turn your back on Bill the Butcher, my God.
And you also have to be able to be an incredible sheriff, and I just think I wouldn't mess with Kathy Bates as the sheriff.
I think that is amazing casting.
Okay, let's hear yours.
I also gender swapped Monk McGinn.
Okay.
I thought it was also incredibly important that someone be able to be an incredible badass, but also be soft and good at negotiating. And I first saw this actress on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Okay.
Being the master manipulator until she herself gets manipulated and betrayed. And she's been in a bunch of other things recently. I've gone back to this actress a couple of times for this podcast. She's been in, most recently, Loving. She was also in Passing. Her name is Ruth Negga. She is Irish Ethiopian, and I think she's a phenomenal actress who needs to be in more things, and so I keep trying to put her in more things.
I mean,
it's a different vibe, and they're very different ages.
Okay, here's my pitch.
Okay.
Do you have someone for McGloin?
I do not.
I pitched that we cast Ruth Negga as McGloin and as McGloin and cast Kathy Bates as Monk.
Okay.
I think we need to have Ruth Negga in it. I think it's really important that we show a variety of different people, and she seems like a total badass. Though McGloin is a brute.
I mean, well, then I guess
brute.
The question is Kathy Bates... Kathy Bates is a little bit too old to be just a straight-up brute.
Right.
So I think it would have to be Ruth Negga, because McGloin is a brute in the version we have. In the version that exists, I think McGloin doesn't have to be that kind of brute in our version. I don't have any problem with making that Ruth Negga.
Okay.
And then we'll go with Kathy Bates for Monk McGinn.
And that's an important relationship for Amsterdam, because Amsterdam, McGloin was a supporter of the priest.
Well, I also think McGloin and Happy Jack, I think, are interesting stories of what do you do when you lose the war?
What do you do when you lose the war?
And I think McGloin and Happy Jack became bitter and angry and didn't care about anything anymore, and they just turned to money, as opposed to Walter McGinn, Monk McGinn, who kind of did his own thing, but kind of like took care of people and took care of himself in his own way. He's the only one that seemed to be emotionally stable, which is why he would have been an amazing sheriff if he hadn't turned his back on Bill the Butcher, which you should never do.
Right.
Okay, great. I love that. Next, I've got Johnny, who you and I both gender swapped. Or I gender swapped. I don't know if you did.
I did not gender. I didn't gender swap Johnny, but I also didn't have any good ideas for Johnny.
Okay.
So
the actress I have for this is really good, really sharp, really funny, but also can portray hurt very well. She's an Irish actress who I first saw in Derry Girls and has recently become extremely famous for her role in Bridgerton. Her name is Nicola Coughlan.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
And it's like, I think for a female interpretation of that character, I think Nicola Coughlan could be right on the money.
So my question is, I can't believe this is about to come out of my mouth, but are we casting too many women?
No. Okay.
The Gangs of New York, a sapphic love story.
Works for me.
I mean, I love her. And she's super well loved. So I think that, I can't say no to this. I don't think I can say no to this.
Great.
It's not possible.
Which brings me, my last actor role is Priest Valen, who you'll remember I also gender swapped.
Oh my God.
But I'm perfectly happy going with a guy. I went with a very well-known Irish actress. And I had to get my head around the fact that, no, I don't cast someone old because this is in the past when she'd be younger. and she'd have a 7-8-year-old kid.
Right.
She is Morgan Le Fay in the TV show Merlin. She is Lana Luthor in Supergirl, and she's also in Jurassic World or something. Her name is Katie McGrath. She is very good at playing a villain because she's Morgan Le Fay. And also, like, she is a villain in Supergirl. She's like a friend to enemies kind of archetype. Or an enemy to friend to enemy kind of archetype.
You have such good pitches for your characters.
I've been doing this a long time.
I'm going to pitch Colin Farrell.
I mean, that's not bad.
I just feel like he is a strong leader. He also plays a good villain.
Yeah, it's true. Is he too old?
Is he too old? That's a good question. I mean, Colin Farrell, don't listen to this podcast where we're calling you too old.
Colin Farrell is 48, so I think the answer is no, he is not too old.
He's not too old, no.
He's also Colin Farrell. He looks 30-something.
He's like got Paul Rudd syndrome.
Yeah. I'm perfectly happy to go with Colin Farrell if you'd rather have another guy as opposed to another woman, I guess.
I mean, okay, so here's my, and I'll tell you, here's my thing, is that...
I also think it's funny if we have this big fight between these two dudes and then the rest of the movie we're introducing more and more women.
I like the idea of... So I think about this all the time as a writer who writes relatively feminist stuff.
Relatively.
I mean, it used to be to the point where I would get like, no, this is too much.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Also if you make like the all-female gangs of New York, it's not going to
It's just going to be the all-female gangs of New York.
Exactly.
That's fair.
So here's my thing, and this is and I'm going to go back to your casting of Johnny really quick. The reason why I don't really want Johnny to be a woman is because I like for Jenny to be bisexual.
Yeah.
And so the love triangle between a man and a woman, to me, gives us something. Like, to me, as a bisexual, I'm always like, why does it always have to be queer or not queer? Or like, why does it have to be gay or straight?
Well,
why can't it ever be bisexual?
Here's the thing. I still see Jenny as being bisexual because remember that for me, the love triangle isn't between Jenny and Johnny in Amsterdam.
Right.
It's between Jenny and Bill in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And you can still have the Jenny of this world being into Bill and having to decide between Bill the Butcher and Amsterdam Valen.
Deciding between David Harbour and Sadie Sink.
Yeah.
What will her Stranger Thing fantasy be?
Oh, that's right. They're both. What will be her Stranger Thing?
What will be her Stranger Thing?
I mean, kind of. I mean,
yeah.
it's very different vibes. But yeah, like I think that whoever you cast as Johnny, there is that love triangle.
Right.
And Johnny's not a part of it.
Right.
But Johnny foresaw themselves as being a part of it, and they're just not.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is then, not to rehash this, but the other thing is then it's a little bit like, it feels like the Bowery Boys or the Bowery Girls, which maybe we were just changing their name to the Bowery Girls, but it's like a female gang against an older male gang.
Yeah, it's possible. Like, the world is changing. The movie keeps saying the world is changing, and Bill keeps saying, not if I have anything to say about it.
Right.
And maybe the future's female.
I mean, the future is definitely female.
Let's leave it as Nicola Coughlan, but we'll put in Colin Farrell.
Okay, we'll put in Colin Farrell. I have one more person. Did you have any more people?
I do not have any more people.
I have one more person I want to cast.
Tell me who.
Which is, I think I want to cast probably Shang. Shang. He's a Bowery boy. He's the Bowery boy. He joins Amsterdam later in the movie. He's in the first scene where Amsterdam is putting out.
Shang is the one who, when there's it's the mob, he runs and tries to attack the cops, and the cops just kill him. Right at the end.
Yes,
I know who you're talking about. Who did you have for Shang?
I want Vico Ortiz.
Who is Vico Ortiz?
Vico Ortiz plays, oh my goodness, what is their name in Our Flag Means Death? Plays Jim in Our Flag Means Death. Vico Ortiz is a phenomenal non-binary actor, and I just think we need a badass to play Shang, who's just down to kick some ass, and I think that's Vico Ortiz.
Great, I'm into it. Vico Ortiz, Shang. Which brings us to writer and director. Okay. I have separate writer and director. Do you have that? Do you have a hyphenate? What do you have?
I mean, I have a separate writer and director. I don't know if my writer is going to be allowed to write this movie because they are someone from my writers group.
That's fair. So why don't you go first then?
I think I would hire Maggie Spellman from the League of Women Writers to write this movie because I've read her. She has a pilot that I told you about earlier, the Staten Island Quarantine Wars, and she also has a feature called White Elephant about Barnum and Bailey, and she is just like, she is such an insanely talented historical fiction writer.
Okay.
And historical fiction screenwriter.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, when I think about, okay, I want a female writer and director. I will say I want a female writer and director for this. They're not the cast, okay? So while I do think that we need to have a mix of people in the Gangs of New York.
It's so fun making people fight against the thing that they believe in.
I do want a female writer and director, and I think that I found myself gravitating towards the female writer directors that we know because there are so few of them.
It's true.
There are not a lot of breakout writer directors.
Okay.
And I think Maggie Spellman would just write a freaking phenomenal Gangs of New York.
Hell yeah. Okay. Good pitch. My writer, I was like, the writer's got to be Irish and they got to do violence well.
Okay.
And who's an Irish writer who does violence well? Martin McDonagh. In Bruges, 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, and 7 Psychopaths, amongst other things. He's a British playwright who's also done movies. He is an incredible writer who occasionally sometimes directs.
I will also say that Marguerite Spellman is Irish and writes violence incredibly well.
Who's Marguerite Spellman?
Maggie.
Oh, yes.
Maggie is Marguerite.
We're not picking anyone yet. We need to hear who the director is first.
Okay, but I'm going to be hard to convince that a man should write the Gangs of New York. Oh, look, they already had their chance. Let us do it now. It's our turn.
Who do you have for your director?
I have as my director the director of Birds of Prey, Kathy Yan.
Okay.
She does violence well.
She does.
We know that.
Uh-huh.
And she can handle big scripts and properties that we care about.
It's true.
I said Kathy Yan.
Great.
I think she's gritty and talented.
Great. My director, I wanted someone, because I knew that we were going to be dealing with a lot more personal stuff, I needed someone who is a good personal director, but also could do big, sweeping, impressive action sequences, and that's kind of what he does in Children of Men.
Okay.
And then he tells a big personal story in Roma. He also directed Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, which means he can do what he's told, because it's a remake. And so that's why I went with Alfonso Cuarón. I'm more than happy to do Maggie Spellman and Alfonso Cuarón.
I mean, if I can only have one, I'll take Maggie.
Yeah.
But I don't like a male being a writer-director on this movie.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I just feel like, I think like if you think about like the great, I've really thought about this because I do want to write something like Gangs of New York. It's so far out of my wheelhouse. But like you have Martin Scorsese and you have Guy Ritchie. And like the people who you have who do big historical gritty stuff are not women.
They're not.
And it's not right because women can do it just as well as men can do it.
I agree with you. And I think that that's fair and reasonable.
But for a breakout writer like Maggie, having Alfonso Cuarón attached will definitely get her audience. So that's the reason I'm agreeing to it.
Yeah, and I think that part of why I picked Alfonso Cuarón is because of Roma.
Yeah.
Is because it's this very personal tale about a relationship with a woman. And he wrote it as well, but like I think that I'm interested in him as the director. And you've made a solid pitch for Maggie, so we'll go with that.
Okay.
But that's Gangs of She York.
The Bowery Girls.
The Bowery Girls. Amsterdam Valen will be played by Sadie Sink. Bill the Butcher will be David Harbour. Jenny Everdeen will be Lee Rodriguez. Boss Tweed will be Hugh Grant. Happy Jack will be Andrew Scott. McGloin will be Ruth Nega. Shang will be Vico Ortiz. Monk McGinn will be Kathy Bates. Johnny will be Nicola Coughlan. Priest Valen will be Colin Farrell. All of this will be written by Maggie Spellman of the League of Women Writers and directed by Alfonso Cuarón. That's Gangs of New York. Dana, are you going to go see this movie?
Yes, I'm going to go see this movie. It's Maggie Spellman, by the way.
I wrote Maggie.
I thought you said Maggie.
I may have said Maggie. I meant to say Maggie, and I apologize. I did write Maggie. I put an E in everything.
I believe you.
Technically, I put 2 E's. Technically, I put 3 E's.
I'm going to go see this movie. Are you going to go see this movie?
I'll see this movie.
Okay, good.
Sure, why not? I think it'll be fun.
I'll sneak some candy into my purse. I'll share.
But that's it. We did it. Despite anyone saying that we couldn't do it, we remade Gangs of New York.
Oh my goodness.
Hell yeah.
And it's only 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Honestly. But yeah, we reached the end of the podcast. Dana, thank you so much for A, making me watch this movie, because I've never seen it, and B, being my guest.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So now's the time. If there's anything you want anyone to do, if there's anything you want them to watch, if there's anything you want them to follow on social media, now's the time to plug that stuff.
What if I don't have anything?
You have social media.
Oh, yeah. I'm Dana Braziel, at Dana Braziel.
Spell it out for people.
Braziel.
Okay.
Everywhere. Instagram, Twitter. That's everywhere, right? Just Instagram and Twitter?
Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on BlueSky and the other one, Threads, but I don't use them.
I'm on BlueSky, but I'm not on Threads. But yeah. Okay, yeah. And cool, great. And vote Union, I guess.
Vote Union. Always Union. Everything should be Union. Everything should be WJ.
If you want to see some of the buttons that Dana has been making, go look at her Instagram, because they're awesome. And if you ever see Dana on strike, get a button.
Yeah, I got buttons. Ask me for a button.
So many buttons. I am on Instagram at Ideal Remake. That's where you can find me. Or I am on BlueSky at Sam Gasch, SamGasch. And yeah, that's our podcast. So I'll end this episode the same way I end every episode. Dana, what is your favorite quote from the movie Gangs of New York?
I like the one you started it out with, but I will do a different one. There are so many good quotes in this movie. It's really hard to pick a favorite, but I love the quote from Amsterdam Valen. It's a funny feeling being taken under the wing of a dragon. It's warmer than you think.